I'll get heaven behind my plan.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Box bites. In the world of Hazbin Hotel, there are angels and there are demons. There is pure good and there is pure evil. There is black and there is white. And if you actually believe any of that, I've got some top quality real estate to sell you. Yeah, despite what these feather-flying foul mouths with their ironic cravings might tell you, this concept of absolute morality where one group is solely right and the other is solely wrong is complete and total toss. When you look at the characters in this show, whether they hang out on the top floor, bottom floor, or main lobby of all existence, the general moral spectrum of each group is grayer than a retirement home on bingo night, regardless of how much some individuals may try to object. And while I'd absolutely love to pick apart every word of the Angels' dialogue and explain why they're wrong, today I'm gonna focus on just one quote.
Angels don't make mistakes.
You don't make mistakes, huh? Really? Well, aside from the various on-screen accounts of deadly sin you guys have already shown so far, I'm gonna make a bold play here and actually flip that statement entirely on its head. Not only do you guys make mistakes, but you might actually be responsible for the biggest mistake that this show's universe has ever seen. All that holier-than-thou garbage, it's all one massive cover-up for their biggest screw-up ever. What do I mean by this? Well, allow me to shed some holy light on the subject and break things down atom by atom. Let's begin. So, the backstory we're given for this world, a la Prince Ahmed-style visuals, stated that once upon a time, heaven was a thing, and it was ruled by angels. Lucifer had some radical ideas for the universe, but the elders told him to stay in his lane and butt out. So all he could do was be a spectator while the other angels did their handiwork. They created the first two humans, Adam and Lilith, from the dust of the earth, created from the literal ground up to be equals. Despite this though, Adam demanded control over everything, and Lilith decided to bounce, as Big A was getting way too big for his non-existent britches. She met up with Lucifer, fell madly in love with him, and the two of them together presented Eve with the fruit of knowledge. This supposedly brings evil into the world, so the angels get salty and throw Mr. and Mrs. Lucy into the fiery pit of their own creation. Lucifer loses his spark while Lilith's only gets stronger, and heaven decides to even the numbers through mass murder, leaving the fate of everything in the hands of Best Girl. And that's pretty much it. So first things first, you might have noticed a massive exclusion from this little story. Where the heck is God? He clearly exists in this universe if Hazbin's canon sister show is anything to go by. We see posters of his supposed quotes on the walls of heaven, and Keeney makes a statement about using the Lord's name in vain, which would make no sense if there was no Lord. So wouldn't it make sense for him to play a part in the story of creation, or at least have a passing mention or something? I'm okay with the angels creating the earth and the universe and everything, or at least claiming they did, but you're telling me that the man upstairs, Charlie's grandpapa, did nothing of note that's worthy of being put in a history book? Well, my belief is that in this universe, God existed before the creation of time and space itself, similar to most religions. And it's during this period where such concepts don't exist yet that he created heaven and the angels. Hence why those two things are the first to be mentioned in all of recorded history. He tells his children to go and craft the universe in goodness and light, with his holy teachings to guide them. He has the utmost faith that they'll make him proud. But the more things that the angels create, the more power they accumulate, the more they start to practice arrogance and megalomania and self-assurance in their seats of power. One could even say that they start to exhibit symptoms of a certain prideful nature. Oh yeah, I'm going there. I like to think that the angels in this story were the actual original sinners. The more control and power they gained without God's influence or help, the more they started to see themselves as above him and decided to just do whatever they wanted to do, even if it was technically sinful. And even worse, they nurtured future generations to behave in a similar way and possibly even twisted God's words to fit their own self-serving agendas. It's totally fine if we behave like this. See? Just look at what the Lord taught us. Why didn't God say anything? Why didn't he try to correct his children in their misled ways? Well, we'll get to that later. But first, let's talk about the OGDICK. In more ways than one.
I'm obnoxious.
We're told that the angels created both Adam and Lilith from the dust of the earth, technically making them equals because they were both birthed of the same material and means. But Adam clearly wanted to run the whole show, while Lilith refused to comply. Now take notes of what I just said. Adam demanded control. He believed that he was entitled to the obedience of someone else for no other reason than because he feels he deserves it. He acts like he's above it all. That's just straight up pride right there. I can't even think of any other way to explain it. Despite the story claiming that evil only entered the world after Eve's choice to try an Apple product, here's Adam himself in the flesh exhibiting signs of the supposed first ever sin before that tree was even a thing. Lilith, you could say to a lesser extent, is prideful as well, even though I mostly see her choice to ditch Adam as an act of self-respect rather than straight up pride. But you could still make the argument that because she sees worth in herself above someone else, she's technically prideful in some way as well. Now, I mentioned before that the angels more than likely grew up to become prideful beings themselves after gaining all this power over the universe they created, adopting other sinful behaviors too as time went on. But because they were beings born of pure light and good, nothing catastrophic ever came from them misbehaving just because their influence was so strong. It's kind of like if you create a sum between a huge positive number and a small negative number, the solution still comes out as positive. And I like to think this is similar to what happens when an angel does something sinful. One force is just greater than the other. However, when these angels created man in their own image, similar to how God did in other religions, and placed their sinful tendencies on a ground that is neutral, this is where the holy crap hits the fan. Now without divine protection, evil finally has a place where it can manifest itself, and in doing so, opens up a pit of eternal suffering for those that are doomed to be damned. The vain servants of God are the actual beings who indirectly caused the creation of hell. And when the elder angels witnessed what they did, they were probably like, oh shoot, did we do that? Luckily, with all their divine power and influence, they're able to keep this newly manifested hellish hiccup a secret from the other holy denizens below them for a short while, ensuring them that everything is fine and to just go about their days. But now they've got a massive problem to deal with. There's no way they're going to be able to keep this under wraps forever. Eventually, something's going to give or someone's going to find out. So how the heaven are they going to weasel their way out of this one? Well, luckily, back down on Earth, the angels are gifted with their ultimate out. At the moment, Lucifer is currently busy warming up to his lady love. And when he makes the choice to give the gift of knowledge to Adam's new bride, the elders realize, oh hey, that's the guy we don't like. This is perfect. We can blame this whole evil emergence thing all on him. Hooray for scapegoats! So that's exactly what they do. They reveal the existence of hell to the angelic public, claim that it's all Lucifer's fault, banish the couple to the land down under, and thus their hands are officially clean. This is all Lucifer's fault now, and no one is any the wiser. Alright, everything seems to make sense so far. The angels are as prideful and untouchable as ever, Lucifer's flame flickers out while Lilith's grows into a bonfire, cool, 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 but there's still one major plot thread just hanging there. How and why did Adam become an angel? Why did they allow this jerkwad to enter heaven, let alone lead a portion of it? Well, don't worry, I've got a reason for that too. When it comes to Adam as seen in the show so far, there are two unique details that stand out to me more than anything else. First of all, when we're shown the backstory scene of Eve accepting the brain food, Adam is absolutely nowhere to be seen. We don't see him accept the fruit and eat it like he does in other versions of the story. It almost seems like it's just Eve partaking in this little event. And second, one of Adam's most standout quotes that he says to Charlie during their meeting is that he's never made a mistake in his life.
I've never made a mistake in my fucking life.
At first I thought that he was lying, knowing fully well that he sins all the time. But what if he isn't? What if he genuinely believes that he's never done anything wrong throughout his entire life? Yup, my prediction is that in this version of the story of creation, Adam actually doesn't eat from the tree of knowledge at all. Eve probably ate it first, and when she saw the sinful things that Adam was doing with her newly found info, she tries to tell him that his actions are immoral, and if he consumes this fruit, he'd be able to see why. But Adam, in all his prideful arrogance, and a little miffed that she had the gall to say that he was wrong in some way, rejected the fruit entirely and just lived his whole life in ignorance, sinning to his heart's content without empathy or remorse, and just doing whatever makes him comfortable, entertained, and happy, regardless of the feelings of anyone else. Okay, now wait a second. If this prediction is true, wouldn't it make more sense for him to go to hell? Why would he go to heaven and be given such a prestigious seat of power? Well, I like to think that Adam didn't come into heaven because of his moral uprightness. He was actually brought into the pearly gated kingdom because the angels had two important uses for him. First of all, the angels wanted to test the true limits of their holy power before they began their first ever execution. With Hell's strength and spirit growing thanks to Lilith's leadership, they weren't entirely sure if their current heavenly might would be enough to combat these newly strengthened forces of darkness. And they wanted to be as sure as possible before sending any of their people down there to clean up. So as a sort of science experiment, they used Adam as a guinea pig to see if heaven was capable of overpowering even the most sinful of sources. So when Adam died, they took him up to heaven to see if their pure light magic was strong enough to turn this darkness-laced, apathetic, indulgent trash stain of a person into an angel like them. And in the end, the experiment was a total success. The darkness within this misogynistic pig wasn't too much for them to handle after all. And if they're able to bring the original corrupt being up to their domain and transform him into one of them, then handling lesser beings of sin should be a cinch. They now have proof that heaven is still the most powerful force in the universe, even with Hell's expanding influence. Send the armies down there, it's time to even some numbers. As for why Adam was recruited to be the leader of Heaven's army, well, really think about it. This is literally a guy who's never been able to distinguish good from evil, right from wrong. He has no sympathy, no empathy, no moral compass to speak of. A person without a merciful bone in their body who will mercilessly slash through hordes of demons and instruct his soldiers to do the same. All for the sake of his own wants and needs, like mindless entertainment and preservation of his comfy status quo. You could not possibly ask for a more perfect person to lead an army than that. A guy who will kill, harm, and insult anyone without a filter as long as he gets what he wants out of it. The perfect, ruthless commander. Plus, he plays a sick guitar. As for Eve, I'm not entirely sure what happened to her. I assume that she was sent to hell since the angels probably shoved the blame onto her just as much as Lucifer when it came to committing the first sin, so they likely casted her down with the other damned souls when she died. If that's what happened, maybe we'll be able to meet her at some point in the series, and she might even be willing to help in the final fight against heaven. Like maybe she actually saved the piece of forbidden fruit that Adam had rejected so long ago, and when they feed it to him in the modern day, his eyes finally open up and he starts to feel bad for what he's done over the years, willingly joining Hell's team to take down the other angels. I don't know, sounds like a cool idea. Alright, so we've covered the Pearly Elders, their gated community, and a bigger tool than the music he probably listens to. But I did mention I'd get back to one topic later on. So grab your holy books and kneel in your pews, y'all. It's time to talk about God. Now, if God exists in this universe, which again, there's evidence to show that he does, how come he didn't take the reins when his children and their creations clearly weren't abiding by his holy teachings and making a mess of everything? Why didn't he speak up? Why was he so hands-off? Well, if you're willing to hear me out one more time, I not only have the perfect way to integrate God into this series, but also an ideal way for this story to end. I like to believe that similar to other depictions of God, this God is omnipotent and omnipresent, meaning he definitely saw and heard everything that's been going down since creating his divine children. Yet despite being a witness to all of it, he still said nothing. The angels acquired a festering sense of pride, and he said nothing. The angels accidentally unleashed evil upon the world and tried to hide it from others while feigning ignorance, and he said nothing. Multiple denizens of hell, many of which were damned for unfair reasons and would be more than willing to try again, are killed in the streets by the thousands, and he said nothing. They basically rewrote history and scripture, practically erasing him from the bigger picture just to further their own selfish egos, and he said nothing. Now, none of this was due to apathy or sloth or anything like that. It's just because of the person that God is. He is the ultimate good, an entity of the purest light. And in the end, he's just too nice of a guy to try and correct anyone. He doesn't want to upset his children by trying to tell them they're wrong. That would be mean. And no matter what happens, he always holds out hope that they'll eventually get back on the right path and realize what they've been doing wrong all along. He has the utmost faith in them, even if they've done nothing but go against him and his word. I'm not gonna lie, the idea of the almighty creator of existence and time being a goody two-shoes cinnamon roll pushover who never spoke up because he doesn't want anyone's feelings to get hurt would definitely be a subversive depiction that could make for both some great comedic and character possibilities. But that's not all. Think about these two character flaws that I mentioned. Misplaced optimism and failure to throw down the hammer when someone is doing something wrong. Who does that sound like to you? Exactly. Charlie is very quick to sugarcoat every single word she says, or at worst, not say anything at all when trouble strikes, and she's willing to see the best in every single person, even if they're the literal scum of the earth. Assuming that my depiction of God is the one that they end up going with, this would essentially be a one-to-one character parallel between Charlie and her grandfather. And if handled properly, it could also open up the doors for the perfect conclusion to this show's main conflict. I'm not gonna go all out and write a full series finale, I mean we'll be getting one in a few weeks anyway, but I'd like to believe that in the last few episodes, Charlie manages to find her way into heaven, maybe with the help of some holy allies like this angel who seems to hate the happenings of heaven as well, and ultimately get to have a one-on-one discussion with the Big G himself. He reveals that he did bear witness to all the grievous acts of his angels and the humans they created, and essentially did nothing to halt them or correct them. He didn't want to come off as some kind of imposing tyrant who forced people into his ways of thinking. He said before time began that he fully trusted them to do the right thing, and he doesn't want to go back on his word like that, so instead he just held on to faith that eventually they would find the right path and end up in the right place by themselves. But after seeing what occurred due to his inaction, he admits that he was fully in the wrong in this case. Regardless of intent, he made a huge mistake. Even if the story doesn't play out exactly like this, I would like the series to involve some sort of lesson about how being too nice can be a detriment to yourself and others. A person going too far towards kindness can be just as dangerous as someone going too far in the opposite direction. Heck, maybe by the end of the show, Charlie will have gone through a bit of a character arc where she learns this exact same thing, and then she's able to sympathize with God when she realizes that he suffers from the exact same flaws as her. But then she can establish a glimmer of hope when she says that it's not too late to set things right, and the first step to fixing our mistakes is admitting that we made one. Then the series would end off with God coming down to hell, probably in the middle of the demon versus angel war that's bound to happen, and admitting to everyone that he's screwed up and he's sorry. He apologizes to Lucifer for not stepping in when the other angels belittled him. He apologizes to the angels for not correcting them in their sinful ways when he had the chance. And he apologizes to the denizens of hell for the suffering they had to go through, even when many of them wanted to repent and change their ways. This would all put a nice cap on the main lesson of the series, seeing the world through shades of gray. I'm sure everyone can agree that it's vital to observe both intention and action before you judge someone. If you look at a mistake or an action at face value without any other context, you're doing it wrong. Sure, someone might have stolen something or harmed someone, but why did they do it? Were they trying to provide for their family? Did they do it in self-defense? Were they ignorant to a situation and just didn't know any better? And when they do realize the magnitude of what they've done, are they truly sorry and want to repent? If you shun someone just for an action without taking anything else into account, following the belief that they had their chance, you're doing them a major disservice. This can be said about a lot of the sinners in hell in this series, and I'm sure many more to come. This can work in reverse too. If someone does an action that is harming others or themselves, but does it with the best of intentions, that doesn't make it any less harmful. You shouldn't be praised just because you meant to do something good if your actions result in the opposite. And if my portrayal of God ends up being canon, it would feed into this lesson beautifully. So the war eventually ends, God promises to be more dominant in his domain, Charlie is revered for her actions, sinners who wish to seek redemption are permitted to do so, and it turns out to be a happy day in both heaven and hell after all. The credits roll and maybe we get an epilogue with the reveal that Charlie and God now have regular visits, ending with them embracing in a great big hug. Heaven? Yeah. Overall, if the story ends up going in this direction, it would cover a lot of interesting ground, explaining why the lead angel is such a sinful, arrogant big shot, giving the morally gray moral of the story some interesting twists and turns, and setting the stage for a sure-to-be godlike conclusion. I don't expect all of this to be right, and I'm no substitute for the real thing. So I guess we'll just have to wait a few weeks before we see what ultimately becomes of our peppy princess and her beloved Double H. But until that day, let's hear what you guys think. Do you think my ideas about the angels might come to fruition, or have I been hitting the angel dust a little too hard? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope to see you all real soon.